We are a feeling people. We think and we feel. And for so long, we've been ignored.
Iliff shouldn't do anything without talking to Lenape people.
We're all equals here. Everyone in this circle is going to have something to say.
This is the second gathering of the Lenape Elders in consultation with Iliff.
There are still remaining effects of what happened back then. And to have a sense of appreciation and accomplishment and hope to keep moving forward helps combat the historical and generational trauma.
This book was so important as a trophy, as a sacred relic of triumph over Indians.
The book represents to me not just one institution's lack of understanding, but it represents to me the whole nature of Christian domination. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
We're here at the Iliff School of Theology to discuss the relationship between the Lenape Elders and the Iliff School.
This is the second gathering of the Lenape Elders in consultation with Iliff about the recommendations which we accepted last year during their visit. So nice to meet you. Welcome.
When we first came, and I told President Wolf this, that I was anxious. I really had trepidation that this was nothing more than a ritualistic dog and pony show, so to speak. But in this year, after hearing them out and getting to know them, they really mean what they say.
Kasiaksi, good morning to you all. I'm going to sing that song again this morning. It's a Morning Star song because it reminds me of my relationship with all living persons that move and live on grandmother this earth with us.
The Lenape way of life was one of understanding that not only do we as the humans have a living spirit, but that all of creation has a living spirit. The animals, the mountains, the rocks, the water, the cosmos, all of that has a spirit. The spirit endures beyond just the physical life. When your physical body is over with, you die in that way. But your spirit continues on in a journey. The murdered Lenape man in the 18th century, whose skin was flayed from his body and turned into a cover of a book then that was put on display at this very institution. All the while, that skin still had the spiritual remains.
Of course, it's deeply ironic that they would cover that book of Christian history with human skin taken from a murder victim that they had murdered an Indian. But they didn't see it that way. I'm Tink Tinker. I'm a citizen of the Wajaji Utseli, or Osage Nation. I came here 37 years ago to teach at Iliff School of Theology, and I'm an emeritus professor from Iliff. In about 1986, shortly after I arrived, one of my colleagues pulled me aside and said, "Nobody will talk to you about this, but you need to know that this happened at Iliff." And he told me the story as he knew it. And I almost left because it is so disturbing to an American Indian. The book is a history of Christianity, written in Latin and published in 1759, but was given this horrendous new cover after a murder in 1779.
What I understand of the history of the book is that a squatter named David Morgan, many generations ago in the 1700s, was taking over land that was actually Lenape land.
And it was David Morgan, a squatter farmer in Western Virginia, now West Virginia, decided for whatever reason to kill an Indian that was walking across what he thought was his farm, his property.
He had his skin flayed so that it could be some sort of a trophy or a treasure. And then somehow this book on the history of Christianity came along, and there was some decision made that it was a great idea to bind the book in the skin of this Lenape victim. The book was, held by the Morgan family, and it evidently was enough of a treasure that it was kind of showed around and bragged about, and so the book was passed from David Morgan, as I understand the history, to a friend of his, Dr. William Barnes.
Barnes kept it with him through 40 years of ministry in the Ohio Valley until 1890, when he decided to move to Colorado. Barnes decides to give this treasure to the new school, and they kept it under display for 81 years. Iliff kept this treasure as a holy relic, a triumphant trophy of Christian triumph over Indian peoples and Indian lands. That's how it got there.
Just the idea of a book covered with the skin of a Native American person was profoundly disturbing. You don't have to be affiliated with the school to feel that. I'm Thomas Wolfe. I'm the president and CEO of Iliff School of Theology. When I first was named president, I was presented with a file marked confidential. And I looked through that file, and it was collections of newspaper articles, a little card, which even described what the cover was about.
So the book continued to be on display, and that is how it became known and into the awareness of students who were passing by that display case. And of course, then we start having the civil rights movement.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't clearly state that it was students at Iliff who raised the issue. I guess the students called the American Indian movement, who didn't know about this book at all, as they went through the process of trying to convince the president of Iliff back then to do something about returning that cover to Indian people. The American Indian movement came and got the cover of the book in 1974. But Iliff, in its infinite Christian-loving wisdom, swore aim to a non-disclosure agreement, a written NDA, that they couldn't talk about it.
So the book cover was taken, and then the book was locked up in a safe, and nothing more was said about it.
Cutting the cover off the book then doesn't remove entirely the spirit of that Lenape murder victim from the book itself. And something needs to happen to that book. But Iliff shouldn't do anything without talking to Lenape people. So we had a long-range plan to bring in a delegation of Lenape elders to counsel Iliff.
To try to change these institutions, it doesn't happen overnight. But it's a start. My name is Curtis Zuniga. In the language of the Lenape, I am called Alushi Oquist, which means he is like a fox. And among my people, I am a chief in the Lenape Nation. I was contacted by Dr. George Tink, to identify some Lenape elders who could speak with knowledge of having been part of our respective communities.
There's no easy answers. We're usually in uncharted territory, and that's what this has been, is uncharted territory.
Our big question is, what do we do with the book? And the understanding was we are preparing ourselves to be guided.
It's important that Iliff School at least listen to us and try to take steps in a new and better direction, because they bear the responsibility of not only accepting this book in the year 1893. It's important that Iliff recognizes that they became complicit in the colonial domination and the racism. So we met at the Four Winds American Indian Center in Denver to have a discussion that framed our intention and purpose, and that gave us an opportunity to put together a statement called the Statement of Guidance and Direction to Iliff. We know the story about this book, and the school wants to hear from us, well, what should we do with it? To be able to say they have counseled with elders who are descendants of the individual who had been murdered and whose skin was part of that book.
We decided a list of insistencies, demands, conditions, however you want to describe it, of what we want Iliff to do to bring some kind of dramatic change to how this book was hidden as a secret and at one point was seen as the trophy of the university, and its contradiction to Christianity and Lenape people.
We set up the room as they requested in concentric circles, and the inner circle would be the people who predominantly be invited to speak or represent the school in one way or another.
First of all, with a circle, there's no head person. We're all equals here, and we're going to take time, and everyone in this circle is going to have something to say.
It really is sort of planting the seed for this institutional change, real institutional change that is truly responsive to the history of indigenous peoples on this continent.
We came with a written statement to kind of direct our focus and try to achieve something.
We can't use the word reconciliation because there's been no conciliation.
I think the problem that I have with the idea of reconciliation is that there was no beneficial relationship to begin with that needs to be put back together. So we really need to re-examine that kind of terminology and realize that, no, this is really establishing that beneficial relationship for the first time.
Good morning.
Morning.
We gathered together 1 year after our first gathering in 22, our Council of Lenape Elders that are in an ongoing relationship now with the Iliff School of Theology.
They're trusting us, and we want to be in relationship, and that means we share information of what's going on about these recommendations and guidelines that they have presented to us and that we have accepted formally.
This is a statement of guidance and direction for the Iliff School of Theology to accomplish the following.
The first recommendation, which was to establish a permanent relationship with the Lenape Elders, has been incorporated into their bylaws by appointing a board officer to be the ongoing liaison.
So it's a structural change, and one of that person's primary responsibilities is to be the steward of that relationship with the elders. That's a significant thing that we've done.
I see a deep commitment on the part of the Iliff School, and people are going to make certain that they work hard at the relationship to make sure that it continues and is maintained over time. And I just deeply appreciate how much time and effort you folks have put into the incremental movement forward to what we know will be a very long and sustained and beautiful relationship. The Iliff School of Theology has worked really hard to follow through on the various commitments that were made last year in terms of a curriculum.
The Iliff faculty are developing an entire curriculum to teach about the Christian doctrine of discovery, the system of domination, the legacy of the Lenape people in particular, and then by extension all Native nations, all indigenous people, and not just in the United States, but throughout all of the Americas.
A few pages of the margins, there's some freehand Greek writing.
There's one course taught by Dr. Loring Abeda.
Loring is teaching a course on the Iliff book, the history of the Iliff book.
Clearly there was a lot of thought over time among various Iliff administrators about what it meant to have this book.
Loring's course is in addition to the recommendation. It's a very important addition, but the recommendation is about building a curriculum.
This new course being developed will be a required part of all students' orientation when they come here so that they learn about this.
I'm also teaching this course on the Iliff book, and in my envisioning of the course, I've been thinking about this ancestor and this man whose skin was taken and literally imprisoned on this book for generations. And so I had an idea, would it be possible maybe to go back to the homeland of that man? And is there something there familiar for him that could become a part of the memorial?
We're working on the memorial, so we're looking at building something, constructing something outside. It will involve some kind of stone, whether it's obelisk or natural stone from West Virginia area where this murder took place.
A memorial to that person, that Lenape man, to remember that he had a family, he was a human being, he had loved ones.
Memorial tells his story, an interpretive center tells our story. Good morning.
This is the proposed space we are looking into for doing the interpretive center.
This morning we met in the library and we gathered ideas about how we now engage the larger narrative in the context of not forgetting of why we're doing this, the history of the Iliff book, but the larger narrative of oppression, of domination, and colonialism that sought to erase the presence of Native Americans.
Everyone would know when they walked through that they're entering this space. And it will be a hallowed space because, in my opinion, it already is. I was delighted to walk into the actual room, but I don't want to seem greedy, but it just isn't big enough because it's not natural for us to be in a confined space. The Lenape room needs to be comfortable for our people and for other people like us to pray and to learn and to think about our own histories, family histories, the national histories of each of our people.
What I'm learning is that there's an array of places that need some fresh thinking about how you deal with histories that are, to say it lightly, uncomfortable or ugly or unjust.
Y'all done a lot of work this year, and I hear this Lenape delegation of elders being really happy with the amount of work you've put into this. That doesn't mean the work is done.
One of the things that I felt was really important for us to do was to talk about how we are building this into the institution so that it will not be dependent on on any one personality or any one person's particular belief that this is a good thing to do, but rather this is going to be a commitment that this generation is making for this institution going forward in time. And so June 30th, I will retire. I will step away from Iliff and leave it to leadership, new leadership.
So I expect that commitment to an ongoing relationship with the Lenape will continue indefinitely, and it will outlive any current board president, university president, or Lenape elder that is assembled today.
Sometimes we get off the main trail and we get way over here and we need to come back. As long as we come back.
I think in knowing the individuals that are currently involved, there is a trusting relationship, but knowing that things do change, people do change, so we need to keep each other on the goal, and as people come in and come out, they need to be updated, so it's a process.
It looks like what we're going to do is we're going to send you home with this. How about that, huh?
I did hear Lenape people saying that this is one of the most meaningful times, and as far as non-native people actually listening for a change and listening in a very deep and meaningful way. So that's a big part of the human relationship that needs to be established and maintained.
We are a feeling people. We think and we feel. And for so long, we've been ignored. And I'm just so grateful, and yet still in disbelief that somebody like Iliff actually sincerely wants to listen to us.
There are still remaining effects of what happened back then. And to have a sense of appreciation and accomplishment and hope to keep moving forward helps combat the historical and generational trauma that our people still carry today.
The book represents to me not just one institution's lack of understanding, but it represents to me the whole nature of Christian domination that displaced and murdered millions of Native people. We can't engage the whole of that history, but it's in this story completely. And so if you can change the people around you, that will go into the world with a new mindset and awareness about this, that's what we're doing.
On this side of that little garden area, there's a maple tree. When I go outside, sometimes I'll walk over to that tree and greet the tree and touch it, because that's my relative. You know, the lilac bush out here is my relative. The bunnies dropping their poop all over the sidewalk, those are my relatives. They're not below me in some hierarchy of humans at the top, animals, and lesser things to the dirt and rocks themselves. Rocks, those are our oldest ancestors. That's what I really want, is for people to begin to think about the world in terms of a different worldview. I want to encourage that. Changing a worldview has to happen for a whole social unit, and it happens over a lifetime. But it doesn't happen until people start thinking a different way.
If I could look 100 years into the future, I would hope to see an institution that fully recognizes the worldview of Native Americans.
As this world has become more and more on acts of individualism and we measure success on that, that I think caring for one another and sense of community is going to bring us a much brighter future. And we need that at this time right now.